Welcome to the Vet Med Wellness and Leadership Podcast, where we discuss central challenges vet med leaders face, such as burnout, stress, and difficult interactions with clients and staff, just to name a few. In each episode, you will hear about actionable solutions that you can apply to your practice and invitations to connect with fellow leaders who are passionate about improving the wellness of the vet med profession. By subscribing, liking, commenting, or sharing this podcast, you are helping more veterinary professionals find the resources shared in these episodes. Thank you in advance for listening and supporting this show. I hope you enjoy it. Hey everybody, Crystal Stokes here, and joining me today is Jake McCormack, who is a retired Marine Corps combat veteran. He now serves as a leadership trainer at Veterinary Practice Partners. Jake is dedicated to cultivating exceptional leaders within the vet med industry, fueled by his own personal mission to serve those who serve. With a commitment to building high-performance teams and fostering dynamic cultures, Jake brings a unique perspective to veterinary medicine, challenging conventional norms to redefine leadership and create meaningful change within the vet med community. So Jake, thanks for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Crystal. I know we already talked about it, but I'm super pumped.
I am too. And to start us off with a pump, I wanted to ask you an icebreaker.
Oh man, okay, let's do it.
Are you going to think about it? What is one weird fact about you that not many people know?
Oh, weird fact.
Special skill. Interesting.
Oh, I don't know why I call it special, but a lot of folks are really surprised to find out that I was in a speaking and singing role in a high school musical. And
I'm going to guess that.
Yeah. It's people don't believe it, and it's true. I sang.
Wow. Is it a musical that we would know?
Some people might. It was called Damn Yankees. I was one of the baseball players, which wasn't too far of a stretch since I did play baseball. It was mostly because me and a couple of the other players, there were some cute girls in the drama class, and we were trying to spend more time with them. And I say I sang, but it was not well. So I felt if anybody in the audience, really long shot, was there, I truly do apologize. You probably still have tinnitus.
Great. All right. That's a good one. So I wanted to have you introduce yourself and how you ended up in veterinary medicine. How do you go from the military to vet med? Tell us a bit of your background, because it's going to highlight our topic today, which is all about resilience, a topic that is very important in vet med right now. So let's hear your story.
Yeah. Man, it's definitely a non-traditional route. I know listening to some of the podcasts and getting to know you host a lot of very learned, educated doctors, and I am absolutely not that. I do have a PhD. I have a public high school diploma, and that's really my academic career was lackluster, to say the least. In high school, I kind of knew from an early age that college probably wasn't in the cards. And when I was a sophomore in high school, most of us will remember that Tuesday morning in September, and I woke up and turned on the news, and I saw the first World Trade Center tower on fire, and nobody really knew what was happening at that point. And as I sat down and continued watching, I actually watched the second plane fly into the second tower, and as the events unfolded in the coming days and weeks after that, and we found out it was a terrorist attack. I had considered the military before then, and after that day, it kind of became a crystal clear kind of objective, and high school really just became an obstacle in the way of getting into the military. So my mom asked me what I wanted for my 17th birthday. I told her I wanted her to sign consent so I could go to the military entrance processing station, which I did the day after my 17th birthday, and after I graduated high school, I found myself in Marine Corps recruit training in San Diego, California. And, never intended it to be a career, but here I am. And really thankful for my time in the military. It gave me the structure I absolutely needed. And and it kind of happened organically. I mean, you do 4-year enlistments and it comes around and you think you're going to get out and you have all these plans, and then you end up re-enlisting, and then all of a sudden here I am, 16, 17 years later trying to figure out now everybody's asking me, what are you going to do when you retire? And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up, because, I've been doing this for so long. And the one thing that I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I had to continue to do was to serve others. That was one of my biggest motivations for joining the military. Was I felt like it was my obligation, my responsibility, I guess, in some kind of abstract way, to do my part, and trying to think about finding another purpose after the military. That was something that was kind of non-negotiable for myself. And the way I got into the orbit of vet med was my wife actually became a practice manager in private practice. And so for, 10 years while I was in the military and we were, going around, she found this career and started really cultivating this career in veterinary medicine. And, happy wife, happy life, all that stuff. If there were dogs that needed to be walked at the hospital, I was up there walking dogs and cleaning kennels and helping out her staff, and got to know some of these folks in the industry. And I didn't really look at it too intentionally then, but I just knew, like, man, these are some fantastic people. They're just cut all from the same cloth. They have huge hearts. They give so willingly of themselves. They take care of animals. And I always felt good being around folks in vet med. And as I was getting ready to transition out of the military, I had the opportunity to do a corporate internship, and that didn't really pan out. Some things happened. Long story short, about a month before I was supposed to start, my original plan was no longer. And I had done some things in the industry, actually, with my wife's organization, Veterinary Practice Partners, and I'd done some recruiting events, and I got to know one of the vice presidents of operations. I reached out to him. I said, "Hey, would you be willing to host me for my internship before I retire?" And he, rightfully so, he was kind of like, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I have this idea because of, being around my wife. I'd seen a lot of the friction points that she was seeing and encountering, from my perception, came from leadership challenges or gaps in leadership development. And she unequivocally said that there was tons of opportunities. So I kind of pitched him on this idea of this job, and he's like, all right, cool, come up with a job description. And me, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I've never spent a day in corporate America. My job description says go beat the bad guys, basically. And now I have to come up with something that, is actually sounds reasonable and professional. And they were very transparent. They said, hey, we can host you. We can help you get your feet wet, give you this experience, but we can't guarantee a role. Like this position doesn't even exist in the company. I was like, yeah, cool. Totally understand. Like, noted. Sure. I need to do something. And I came up with this kind of leadership development. It was all centered around supporting the hospital teams. The general public don't really understand or know what happens in a veterinary hospital on a daily basis. They, have this idea. They come in, they go in an exam room, their dog or cat gets examined, and then it goes back in the treatment room, or they drop them off and they can pick them back up, and, everything's done. But what happens in the back of treatment rooms all across this country, it still blows my mind, even a year later after being in this role, of the level of medicine, the level of care, the level of attention that is given to these pets. And the folks in vet med move mountains on a daily basis, and it's second nature to them. And so I just kind of ingrained myself as much as I could in all these veterinary hospitals, and really just sat back and observed and tried to figure out how I could be additive to them and be of assistance. So short story, kind of long, or long story, kind of short. I don't know, but I'm still questioning myself, Crystal, on how I ended up here some days. So I'm just really happy to be here.
It's a great story, and I wanted to then draw on, as you were standing back and observing and witnessing the challenges the veterinary professionals face. Like you said, moving mountains. I completely agree. The challenges they face on a daily basis. If the general public knew, like how amazing would that be, right? We'd be sending our veterinarians love letters and care packages on the daily. So I think that the reason I want to ask this is in our previous conversation, it related a lot to experiences that you had in the military. Like there were some parallels there where you could really relate, and that you drew from some of your experience in the military and the creative process of, how do I think I can help? So talk through that. What were you seeing as those parallels?
Yeah. So being in the military, I very early on, like I said, I joined because of 9/11. I never really had rose-colored glasses on about what I was going to be joining to do. And that was 100%. I knew I was going to be forward deployed somewhere in the world. And about a year and a half after I joined, I was forward deployed to Iraq for the first time, 19 years old. Deployed to Fallujah, Iraq. At the time, was considered one of the most dangerous places in the world. And that was a really, it's a really impactful way to grow up at 19 years old. Being forward deployed, being, in really dangerous situations on a daily basis. And during the course of that deployment, we lost 2 Marines from our company. And they were both guys I knew pretty well. And that was probably my first experience with trauma, and something that was really impactful. And, unfortunately, or fortunately, it can be viewed in a lot of different ways. The military can kind of give you the impression that emotion is weakness, and that you have to be very stoic, and you have a mission to do, and you have to keep pushing forward. And being 19, you don't really know how to balance that. So the way I took it at 19 years old is, I'm just going to shove all that crap deep down inside, and I'm not going to deal with it. And then, fast forward a year later, I'm on my second deployment back to Iraq. And during the course of that deployment, I lost 4 guys. If I get choked up, I'm sorry. One of those guys is a really good friend of mine, and he was killed by a suicide vehicle-borne IED, and he was at a different platoon. And anybody that's ever been in the military, I can't really put into words the bonds that are formed when you're in the military, especially if you're forward deployed, but family doesn't even come close. And the guys in his platoon were absolutely devastated and crushed. And the fact and the reality of combat is we have to get that vehicle up and operational again, regardless of what happened to it. So somebody has to get that vehicle up and operational. And that responsibility fell to my platoon. And I ended up having to clean up pieces of my friend. Off the inside of that vehicle. And that moment almost broke me. And again, did deal with it, put it down inside. We were 2 months into our 7-month rotation. Lots of other really crappy stuff happened. And then all of a sudden, at the end of my rotation, I'm back home, and it's just kind of rinse, wash, and repeat. And, at the time in 2005 and 2007, we didn't really have the understanding of, post-traumatic stress and depression and traumatic brain injuries the way he did. I myself have had over 10 concussions from explosions, all kinds of different stuff. So didn't really even know it wasn't something they were looking for. And so, the viewpoint started to shift kind of later on, further in my career. And after about being in for 15 years, they started understanding like, oh, traumatic brain injury is a real thing. Oh, now, the suicide rate is getting to epidemic proportions. We're losing 22 veterans a day to suicide. And that's not even accurate anymore. It's closer to 44 veterans a day. So there's just this whole kind of like set data sets that you can't argue with that's going on. And they realized they had to start doing something. They started to try to encourage folks to go to mental health professionals, psychologists, therapists, counselors. And I'll never forget this. One of the Marines I looked up to, I mean, a generational type of leader, incredibly impactful to me still to this day. He had been on more deployments than I had, and he finally got to a point. He said, "I need to go talk to somebody." And in the Marine Corps, we call them the wizards. You're like, "Oh, you're going to go mental health. You're going to go see the wizard." Well, he went to the wizard, and the military kept on saying, "Hey, it's okay. You can go talk to somebody." Well, he went and had this conversation with a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist asked him pretty bluntly, "Have you ever considered hurting yourself?" He's like, "Every goddamn day." He's like, every day, because him, myself, lots of other guys, we have this survivor's guilt that kind of comes over us, that we feel like we should be here and these other guys should. So he communicates this to the psychiatrist, and in the military, everything's very black and white, even with mental health professionals and doctors and supporters. And I understand it to an extent, but as soon as he communicated that, he couldn't handle weapons. If you can't handle weapons, you can't train. If you can't train, you can't deploy. And long story short, they ended up medically retiring him short of his 20 years. And he had zero intention of getting out of the military until he had been in for 30 years. So I had this front row seat to watching this Marine I held in such high regard say he wasn't okay, went and sought help, and, basically was almost punished for it. And he had the one thing that he loved more than life itself taken away from him. And that just kind of like, oh, well, I thought I might say something, but I am definitely not saying shit now. Like I'm going to keep my mouth shut. And I did until I got approved for retirement. Like I had my paperwork in my hand at a retirement date. And that was the first time I ever said anything. And whoa, you want to talk about a high five in the face with a chair of like unpacking all these years of like repressed emotions and stuff. But I finally started talking about all these things and kind of dealing with it. And I say all that to say this is I first started drawing the parallels between these two communities in about 2016. A good family friend of mine, her name's Lindsay. She's a DVM out of California. She was the first one that told me about Not One More Vet and about this organization that does incredible work. I'm sure your listeners are very familiar with them. And I was like, well, what do you mean Not One More Vet? And she goes, the suicide rate in veterinary medicine is ridiculously high. And she educated me to what was going on and what the reality of veterinary medicine was. And I'll never forget that conversation. Like core memory, 100%. But ignorance is a really weird way of like not letting you kind of see different things that are out there. But as soon as that kind of veil was lifted off my face, I became really, really in tune to it and saw all these things that were happening. And And that kind of always stuck in the back of my mind. So when this opportunity came for me to have the opportunity to support a community of folks, thankfully, rightfully so, the veteran community, military communities get a lot of focus and attention. So many incredible organizations out there that are doing great work for our men and women that served in the armed forces. But veterinary medicine, we're not doing nearly enough. So yeah, it's kind of funny because people, when I tell people about it, they're like, I never even thought about it that way. Like I didn't see this correlation, these parallels. So,
absolutely. And I see it so similarly as you. You know, my background prior to coming back to veterinary medicine is I worked with first responders and military. You know, as a PTSD and anxiety specialist. So I've sat with many of you and heard many of the stories. And thank you so much for your service. Like it feels like the words are just so small compared to the way I feel. And you're right that there are so many parallels between what military people feel and what veterinary people are feeling. And even the magnitude of the issue compared to the support given, we're still way behind, I think, on both sides personally. So I'm glad we're here to talk today. Let's dive into resilience. And I want to say this real quick. We're not going to do it justice. This is a very big topic. And I would love to point people back to you just preemptively right now to say, you have so much to give in terms of toolkits around resilience. You've hosted talks. So I think that for those who are listening today, if you feel, you know, even now just hearing that story, encouraged to touch base and have that personal support, I do want to just go ahead and put that out there that this is a really big topic. We are going to talk about some of the more like core nuggets of resilience that Jake wanted to share. I think that Jake has a bit of a unique approach. That's part of why I was really interested to have you on today. So let's just go into some of the elements that you would say are really central when you are talking to people about resilience.
Yeah. So, I mean, I try to set the stage a little bit when I'm doing these resiliency talks. You know, I've had conversations at universities. I've had conversations at different veterinary hospitals all over the country with the company I work with, and I think a really central core element of it is, you know, understanding and recognizing that bad things happen to all people. And in a way that I do that is I'll ask everybody just to listen, and I ask them about some pretty big life-changing events. And it's, you know, I ask them, have you ever lost anybody you ever truly loved? Have you ever had your heart broken? Have you ever struggled through divorce? Have you been a victim of infidelity? If you've ever lived through a natural disaster, if you've been bullied or made fun of, if you've ever had a miscarriage, if you've ever had to make the choice to have an abortion, if you struggled through infertility, if you've been a victim of violence, if you've had suicidal thoughts or ideation, I mean, just, you know, all these just terrible things that happen that we all know about. I ask them all those things. I say, if any of these things apply to you or somebody you love, please stand up.
And those listening right now, like if any of these things apply to you, take a moment, take a beat and acknowledge that. And then keep going, Jake.
The thing is all of these things, hearing them listed out, it's incredibly impactful. But when I say that, and to everybody listening, when you think about that, if you're standing in a room of 300 people and I said that list, I could almost confidently say with 100% confidence that every single person in that room would stand up. Mm-hmm. We are all affected by pain and suffering and hurt and loss. And the fact of the matter is, especially in the veterinary community, a lot of times we have no idea that the people to the left and right are dealing with or have dealt with these things in their lives. Mm-hmm. And the biggest illustration of that is pain doesn't discriminate. Hurt, loss doesn't discriminate. It doesn't It doesn't come at a time of our choosing. It doesn't show up on the date that we pencil it in for. Like, yep, I am emotionally, mentally, physically prepared to deal with some really shitty stuff right now. Let's go through it. That's not how it works. And I think that's a really important thing to recognize, is that pain comes, it doesn't discriminate, and it's going to happen. Pain is intrinsically linked and interwoven in the fabric of everybody's lives. And the thing is that if we recognize that pain is a part of life and it's woven into our history and our futures, we don't allow ourselves to be victims of that pain. Because a lot of times what happens is, it happened with me, victimizing myself. Why am I worthless? Why am I here and these other guys that I lost not here because they would be better? I was victimizing myself, and it's all BS. It doesn't do us any good. It's just spinning your proverbial wheels in the mud. It's a lot of energy and a lot of effort, but you're going nowhere.
Let me pause here and say, like, those, for even myself, I think those listening, if you think back to a painful, event that you've experienced, I think we have this knee-jerk reaction of asking why me? Why did this happen? That why question is so common. I almost think we're wired to ask it. But the point you're making is there's a better question to ask, isn't there?
There is a better question to ask. And the better question to ask is what I'm doing helping or harming me? And it's a really good thing to keep in the back of your pocket when you're in those moments where, you're asking why is there traffic right now? I need to be at this appointment. And it kind of goes back. I'm a huge believer and kind of advocate and geek about Stoic philosophy. And it's recognizing the things that are in your control and the things that are not in your control. That's a big tenet of all the Stoic philosophers, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus. And when you recognize the things that are within your control, the things that you can affect, you're kind of taking back power, and you're not allowing yourself be powerless to things that are completely out of your control, or just bogged down by things that are completely out of your control.
I love that. Exercise I commonly give to my clients is to take a piece of paper and fold it in half. And then on one half, you write everything that's under your control, the controllables, and then everything that's not. And I say the controllables, that's your lane. This is what we have to let go of. And just because our mind, again, tends to ruminate on the uncontrollables. We don't like feeling out of control. We just think about it more. Somehow we're going to gain control, which never happens. Instead of actually supplying energy to the control list, because if you can focus on the controllables and take action over there, that's where the magic happens. And I also want to highlight, I remember from a past conversation we had, another powerful question I like that you brought in was also, instead of asking, why did this happen to me? Or, why me? To ask what's next. Like, you had this way of, let's look at the next steps. Like, this happened, like you described with your buddy, it happened. You can't undo it. What do you have to do next? So you said in your story, I still have X number of weeks of deployment. I have to get through it. That's what's next. You have to focus. And I think that people in vet med are so good at this. You see them in these moments of triaging. Something goes horribly wrong, but they have 4 other animals coming in. They're on it. Like, they have a way of separating that temporarily to focus on what's next and keep going.
And 100%, Crystal. I mean, compartmentalization, and it's a fact of life for people in the military, law enforcement, first responders, healthcare workers, people in the vet med community. When you have a family that is having to put down their beloved dog, and you have to be the person to help them support through that, and then you take care of that and you go through that, you're feeling those emotions, you're absorbing those emotions, but you don't have time to deal with it in the moment. And then a lot of times the reality for, a ton of veterinary professionals is they walk out of that exam room, they walk 3 feet to the left, and they're going in another exam room with a wellness check on a 1-year-old puppy. And there's 2 little kids in there, and they're, happy and laughing. And you have these two just incredibly extreme opposites that are occurring within seconds of each other and feet of each other. And that's the reality of veterinary medicine on a daily basis. And the folks that are in this industry, they're cut from a different cloth. I will die on the hill that the folks in veterinary medicine are just cut from a different cloth. They're a different caliber of human being, and they don't hear it enough. I'll tell it to them till there's no lung in my breath, or no breath in my lungs. Sorry. They are asking what's next. And I think a critical aspect that a lot of folks in veterinary medicine is they're not giving themselves the time and space and grace to unpack these emotions and deal with them. And I know firsthand that it's incredibly hard to do that. And for me, if nobody takes anything else away from me bumping my gums today, like I want them to know I poisoned myself from the inside out because I didn't unpack all these emotions. I didn't deal with them. I didn't process them. And I was lying to myself on a daily basis saying, I'm okay. And it wasn't until the people that were around me that cared about me and supported me and even dealt with me being an a-hole because I was lying to myself, they stuck with me and they said, hey, we're here for you and you need help. You need to deal with this.
Yes. And that's a commonality I see between, I consider myself a veterinary professional and that I was a technician first before I became a therapist. And now I'm back in vet med as a consultant and coach. But the arc that I see when I compare the work that I do with veterinary professionals compared to veterans, very similar approach to managing stressful life events, stressful day-to-day events, which is typically, like you said, stuff it down and move forward. And in the moment of triage or getting through your day, that's a fabulous skill to have. We just need to add to the toolkit. And this is the part I learned as a therapist. And I will say it was very hard for me to slow down and unpack my own, experiences. And I did it before becoming a therapist and through my therapeutic journey. And it sucked the whole time, honestly, like having to sit with these emotions, work through them, come out the other side. That's part of your what's next question is what's next for you to really be a healthy, thriving human? What's next for you to let go of the big boulder that you're carrying on your back? Because we do need to do that. It's not even like you have permission or you deserve it. That's absolutely true. You also need to do it in order to continue to thrive in your career. So I think that having people, that's what we need to really look at when it comes to the model of how we operate within these companies. Advocating for making that space, for having processes built in cookie cutter to the model of veterinary medicine of how are we going to take care of these humans. I'm kind of digressing. I'm getting all, into my soapbox modes.
I love it. Yeah. preach, Crystal.
I get frustrated with it. It's just, it's impossible to expect people to be healthy if we don't build the models correctly. It's a system issue, in my opinion. It's not a personal issue because we are all going through it. Nobody is unique little snowflake when it comes to the stress that they are feeling within the veterinary clinic. And I wanted to also come into another aspect of what you like to talk about when it comes to resilience around your tribe, because this is, I think, the final point, and it's really important. We're kind of talking about systems. Let's talk about the tribe.
Yeah. So, kind of going back to Stoic philosophy and, one of my favorite quotes is, it's by Marcus Aurelius, and he said, "It never ceases to amaze me that we all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." And so it's like we love ourselves. We're all the center of our own universes, but when it comes to we're all intimately tuned in to what everybody else thinks about us, and it's something I've been there. Seeking approval from other folks and letting people come into my life that I knew were toxic or they weren't being additive, but for some, superfluous reason, I was letting them be a part of my life. And it took a long time for me to, in addition to asking, it kind of stemmed from, is this helping or harming me? When I was thinking about my own actions of my thought processes and what's within my control and what's not within my control. But then I started extending that to, is this person helping me or harming me? Is this person that I am investing time and energy into, are they being additive to me, or are they being subtractive? And it's obviously not, we're not talking in the context of interactions like with people, like somebody makes you upset or pisses you off and you're just like, nope, you're out, like you're voted off the island. Like I'm not talking like that. But if you step back and you objectively look at somebody and the value that they bring into your life, are they being additive to you? Are they adding value? Are they supportive? Do they cheer for you? Do they support you? Do they help you? Do they lift you up when you're down? Or do you find yourself sitting back and wondering, does this person really support me? Or am I just a transactional relationship? Like, I'm sure if we think about it, we all know somebody in our life that most of the time, the only time they reach out or you hear from is if they have this, beat around the bush conversation before they get to what they really want. And that's not a good feeling to have. And it took a long time. I mean, I still kind of fall victim to it. Sometimes I'm a lot better about it now, but I find myself evaluating people and being much more ruthless about who I'm spending my time and energy and who I'm allowing to be a part of my tribe and be a part of my circle. And something I have to reiterate to other folks is, like, if you have toxic people in your life, they're being subtractive and you don't have the time or space or energy to deal with it. And you need to call a spade and just let them go. Hey, it's been real. It's been fun. It hasn't been real fun. Good luck with all the rest of your endeavors moving forward.
I like this also, the kind of applying that same concept to, we can do it to many different things. Are the thoughts I'm having in my head, the ones I'm choosing to pay attention to, additive or subtractive? Like, is this rumination on something I can't control that's actually just draining me, helping me at all in my life? Am I getting stronger or more resilient or moving forward? Not really. But if I have a different thought process, like I choose to think in a calm manner, to look for the ways we could move this forward, to look at the things I have control and I can take ownership of, there are just these ways of kind of separating out. And I think if we slow down enough and pause and are reflective, I think it's a lot of what coaching and therapy and those sorts of things do, or even having a supportive practice manager, somebody you can talk to work through these things. These moments of reflection are really, really powerful. And what I'd like to do now, as we're coming down the home stretch of this podcast, the people listening are veterinary professionals, are often very busy humans. And I know that we just spewed a lot of great information at you all. So for those listening today, if they can only store one or two things in their very powerful brains, what do you want them to take away from this talk today?
Oh, man, I feel bad taking up real estate in those big, beautiful brains in the veterinarian community. But the things I would tell them is, recognize, accept, and own that pain is a part of life. And no matter what we do to mitigate it, minimize it, diminish it, it's going to find us at one point or another. And don't allow yourself to fall victim to the why. Why now? Why me? The universe is against me. God is against me. Whatever it may be, don't allow yourself to fall into that trap. And by extension, you need to ask yourself that really, really simple question that can sometimes be really hard to answer is what I'm doing helping me or harming me? For me, that question can boil down to, is me getting out of bed at 11 o'clock at night to go get the pint of Ben & Jerry's, is that helping me or is that harming me? Yeah, it's a hard question to answer sometimes, but it's just a real quick mental check for us to kind of remember and keep ourselves on the right track.
I like it. It's so simple, but very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Jake, I have loved having you on the podcast today. For those listening, if they want to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to find you?
Easiest way, Jake from VPP, not from State Farm. I do wear khakis, only on occasion though. I got tired of always, Jake from State Farm. Why aren't you in khakis? So I kind of just leaned into it. But Jake from VPP on Instagram, Jacob McCormack on LinkedIn. I would love to connect with all of you. I don't care what you do in vet med. My number one goal is to be supportive to this community, to be additive to this community. And I think that nobody else outside of vet med is going to help make the changes that we all would like to see. And I think it's really got to come from our tribe, from our vet med tribe, that we need to lean on each other and have really open and honest conversations about the changes we want to see and then go out and make it happen.
Thanks for role modeling that today.
I'm very, very humbled to have the opportunity to come and talk with you, Crystal. And like I said, I love this community. I'm y'all's biggest hype man. If you need some motivation, come reach out to me. I'll pump you up. I'll get you ready for that 10-hour day with all the Chihuahua appointments that are going to probably try to bite your face off. Or just some really, not so great clients that you have to deal with.
You get it. I can tell. Well, Jake, thanks again for being on, and it was a real blast. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, Crystal. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you feel stoked after listening to this episode. And as always, I would love to hear your comments and feedback. Is there a topic that you want to know more about? Please let me know. And thank you again for subscribing and sharing your favorite episodes with others. It really means a lot.